So I started a work entitled Something Folk. It's what I describe as a choreographic landscape, where questions about folk can appear. So both folk that we've learned or personally inherited through our personal ancestry, but also the potential of what a folk might mean or could be or could do even in consideration of difference. That from compiling a folk based on multiple narratives, multiple histories, there's like our political landscape and political imaginary are both very small and very cruel and have determined that some folk are more valuable than others. So, and for me, this is an opportunity to think with a very fractured past and how history has created this fracture amongst different kinds of folks, how I could still reanimate these questions of collectivity amongst difference, using an imagined folk as a way to bring people together despite this fractured past. There are a number of influences that have inspired this work, but I'm using a kind of medieval landscape, in part inspired by a really beautiful film that I saw, Hard to Be a God. So I like this idea of this kind of allowing for this to kind of emerge in another time, and using that as a way to construct what I describe as a kind of allegory, or in terms aesthetically, I want the piece to have a feeling of like a moving painting. So I'm working a lot with like figuration, like figuring the body. So, and we talk a lot about what it might mean to have a painterly approach to movement and to gesture and to posture. So we're working a lot on just the limitations of this human figure in a very literal way. So movement appears stranger than maybe one might expect or see maybe in another dance work. So in a way, I took something that's a little bit far away from everybody in the room by choosing this medieval landscape. So anyway, it's an elsewhere for everyone. So then in that we share some sort of commonality. And then from there, I described how from digging in my ancestry, I located certain figures that appear, and Isiguapa is a indigenous folkloric tale from the Caribbean, and she walks backwards in a way to escape from the potential settler, or it's like her feet are figured backwards. So when she walks forward, it looks as if she's walking the other way. It's a kind of form of disappearing. So we work a lot on walking backwards in backspace, and this is something I've integrated in all of my work. So maybe or maybe not, it's located in this ancestral tale. But I like when I discovered that, I was like, oh, interesting. So for me, that was kind of a thing that sparked my curiosity. It's like, oh my God, there's so many stories that we think are so unique to us, and that they start now. And actually, not only do stories usually emerge from a very distant elsewhere, they're also often shared. So there are things that, despite their cultural specificity, there are many folklores that actually operate similarly in terms of teaching us about the good, the bad, what to be careful of. I mean, they just are figured differently. They just look a little bit different, but their purpose, to have a similar purpose. And it's very important to communicate that I was not interested in doing any sort of like ethnography, right? And going to an elsewhere and picking up somebody's folklore and then having all of us learn it. For me, that wouldn't be appropriate, because actually we just have to listen and trust that all of us are full of these stories, and then how can we playfully animate them in a world that's shared. The initial title was not yet a title, because I was like, I've been busy with thinking a lot about this idea of folk, but for me it's like the collective. There's a Palestinian writer, Adania Shibli, who beautifully articulates how naming things inevitably give them power, and that for her, that's why she doesn't like to name things. So, and for me, there was something very interesting about maybe making something that doesn't, like, that it doesn't have, like, this folk doesn't become an actual folk that says you can't be part of this, or you know what I mean? It can't concretize or become a folk only in and of itself. So there was something about not naming that I thought could be interesting, but then that's why I arrived something folk. It's like a thing that will remain kind of ambiguous or hopefully open-ended, especially now in consideration of the way in which politics operate. Like there's this both a kind of nativist return, this idea that this land is ours, a kind of possession based on this idea of who the folk are that deserve to be here and who don't. So like, and that's interesting to me that happens at the same time that there's questions around indigeneity, or that of course that the backlash of listening to others' stories is, oh, let's possess ours and make sure it's only for us. That there's always this idea, so that retraction backwards and to try to possess something and try to make it stagnant, as if folk is something that isn't always constantly emerging and unfolding and being hybridized by new things and made, so to try to hold it in time. And then additionally, I think that there's this idea when you talk about folklore in a Western imaginary that you go to the Orient or you go to the Global South to find the folk, to tell you some sort of authentic truth about their ancestral past or something. There's there are many like representational traps, and like whenever it's like we go now to Madagascar to see those folk dances, and they are, they will reveal some sort of truth to us. Or so this kind of absurdity, and it's linked to a kind of ethnographic gaze, and thinking that even some of this folklore might be trapped. So it's like that represents the past, and we in the Western world represent the contemporary. What is so seductive about the folklore from an elsewhere? Why? Like when we could also find that just here, the folk right here and now, that's kind of always present, that's always emerging.